Welcome to Media Matters. And my good friend Marie Buskey is away today. So in her seat is Simon O'Connor, who I've been looking forward to. We had a bit of a chat yesterday, which was the first time we've had a one-on-one chat, isn't it? And realized we've never met in person. Like so many people I've come to think that I know quite well. But yeah, welcome,
It's great to
Simon.
be here.
Yeah,
It's great
thanks.
to be. Look, I can't fill Marie's shoes, but look, I'm honoured to be here. But I'm like you. It's funny. We've seen each other on the host chats, but we've never met in person or had a long conversation. But I get that same familiarity
Yeah.
as well. And I don't know about yourself. Other guests that I actually interviewed, particularly around the world, when I do get to meet them, it's like, oh, hello. It's like, well, hold on, we've only ever been on one Zoom call.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. And the news came through this week that Brooke van Veldon is resigning, and I don't think I'm giving any confidences away when I say that we had a question from Marie Buskey to you yesterday, asking if you're going back, and your reply was, "Too happy doing what I do now to return to that
Yes.
place."
So no confidence has been broken. No, look, that news I have to say came out of the blue. I was very, very surprised. I was actually, of all things, I was busy looking at the voting records of MPs to do with a drinking bill
Mm.
for one of my clients for Family First when the news came through, mainly because my phone sort of just started pinging. So it took me completely by surprise. Um, I have to say, look, I don't know Brooke well, but it's clear that this was just too much. And it was time to step away. And I actually say kudos to her. I've seen far too many people in politics who it's a hard life. It's an exceptional amount of work, electorate work. I have to say, having been an electorate MP for 12 years, it's
Mm.
massive, Marty. And so, as I say, too many MPs push on through um, to their detriment. So good on her for making that call to say, look, time for me to step away. But yeah, I've had a lot of people messaging me going, "Oh, will you go back?" It's like, no, I'm loving this new season in life.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, despite that, I have to ask you, have you thought how hilarious it would be to win back your seat for New Zealand First? Because I have.
Yes. Well, it's been put to me actually by different people for different parties. I think at one level it would be funny, but I think another part of me after I said I enjoyed my 12 years in Parliament, loved it,
Mm.
particularly the work with the electorate, work around the China question, foreign affairs. There was a lot of things I loved, but I love being out my time now with my wife, with Rachel. The kids, I mean, that God, the youngest is 22 now, but we get to travel a lot more. I get to say and do what I want,
And
including
you've
being
done
on
it,
RCR.
right? You've done it. So you know
I've
what
done
it's,
it.
yeah, you know what it's like.
I
Oh, that's,
encourage others now as I travel the country and I do lots of speaking gigs with different hats on, particularly to the younger ones. It's like, hey, step up. And the slightly older ones who say, oh, Simon, we want you to go back. It's like, well, no
well, I
thanks.
noticed,
Very flattering.
one of my harebrained schemes that seemed to interest you was my, and I've mentioned it before on a few backstage passes, but I think RCR could profitably, not in terms of money, but in terms of the impact we have, make some content for younger people.
Mm.
Because I get to see firsthand, having my children are younger than the ones you're dealing with. But my oldest is 14, and so I get a real insight into how traumatized they are. I don't think that's
Mm.
an inappropriate word to use, because they'll say something, and if you disagree with them, it's clear that they've got this really binary system that's been implanted into them through the education system, where they think, well, good people think that. So if you're a good person, think that. And if someone disagrees with that, then they're evil,
Mm.
because it's not a rational discussion. It's a
That's that's exactly what it is. It's a meltdown. Look, there's so much actually there to unpack. The first is the paradox or hypocrisy of the binary. Because of course we know with a lot of the activists, the progressive activists these days, they hate binaries supposedly. There's 260 plus and growing genders, for example. And yet, you're quite right, Marty, when it comes to the education of our children, um, it is all of a sudden very black and white on a whole series of issues. And so, in the New Zealand case, from the treaty to climate change to moral issues, and certainly political issues, you have to be on the left. In fact, you have to be to the far left, is what the kids are being told. And I think, too, you've really identified they are told to feel, not think.
Mm.
And they talk a lot about this critical theory that's in schools. And so a lot of parents, they go, oh, critical theory, that sounds good. It's like, it's not critical thinking in the way that we would ponder what's the rational, logical approach to things. Critical theory is from the Marxist school, the Frankfurt school strictly, which teaches young people to deconstruct the reality around them and to see everything in moral terms. So you and I, to them, and they're teaching the young ones this, it's not that we just have wrong opinions, we're wrong. You and I are wrong, which is why they get very insulting. I'm not saying your kids necessarily, but
Oh, my kids'
society.
friends do. It's astonishing. The word bald old white man gets used as
Oh, outrageous.
justification for why. And this is someone I was employing.
Well, at least they know what a man is.
Yeah, well, I don't know. But in true Media Matters style, we had a producer join us once, whose first impression upon seeing it was, it's pretty loose, isn't it? Which I took as a badge of honor. And so, in true Media Matters style, I think our producer said I'd send you about three topics that I wanted to talk about. You send me three, and so we've done none of that.
We've done none of it. We're men.
What
Who follows instructions? Oh
what,
no,
what did you look at?
honestly, I actually, it was one of the things I loved in political life was public meetings, because you've got no idea of what you're going to be asked. Like, you can go in for an hour. Normally a public meeting is an hour. I'd go in with 10, 15 minutes of things I'd want to talk about. Then just open the floor to questions. And honestly, Marty, you've got no idea. And there's a certain energy in that. For some reason, often the first person to put their hand up had the wackiest of questions and never wanted to give the microphone back. It happens all
Yeah.
the time. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing what we discuss.
Yeah, I was at a public meeting with Sam Uffindell. Well, it was a semi-public meeting. It was a potluck dinner with a group that I go to, mostly older people. And what I was struck with was his nervousness,
Mm.
which I think came out of a certain form of cognitive dissonance, where he had things that he was meant to believe that he really didn't believe, and he really didn't want to set out any sound bites that were going to derail the corporate drone agenda that he's meant to agree with. That was
Yeah, I
my
can't.
impression, not what he said, I should say.
Yeah, and I know Sam well, really, really rate him, and
Right.
nice guy. And I think, hell of a start in politics. But I can say more generally, having been there, it is a real tension at times between, particularly when you're an electorate MP, obviously wanting to hear what your constituents are saying and thinking, so giving them that space, what you think and believe, and then the real tension, you use the term corporate, the National Party in this case, but it's the same for the Labour Party, the Greens, whoever. They've got their, if you will, talking points. And at times, not all the time, but at times, Marty, it doesn't align. It'd be
Mm.
like me being told now, I mean, obviously I'm out of Parliament, but to go and tell people that we've got, great economic management of the economy. Well, I could say that, but I know darn well that's not what's happening.
Everywhere I
So
see broken eggs, comrade, where is omelette?
yeah, exactly. So there is that tension, and then of course just different MPs. They're all human, so some are very gifted communicators, some are not. Some hate public meetings, some love constituent work, some just love to be in their offices reading policy. So you've always got variance. But your key point, I would agree with, is there is a lot of tension in MPs, often between what they think and feel, what their local constituents think and feel, and what the political party is telling them. And it's probably a discussion for another day. But the political parties now, the leadership of the parties, really do control the parliament. You've got 120 or 123 MPs currently, but it's really run by one or two, in effect.
Yeah, right. So, well, I mean, do you want to run through what you looked at? Obviously, there's the kind of, you can hear the hands being rubbed together at the prospect of imposing lockdowns on us again, this time for fuel. I mean, they're burning beehives. There's, Chloe Swarbrick saying it's time to give everyone free public transport. That's the go-to. Free. Um, there are three tankers holding the last of New Zealand's confirmed oil supplies, according to a newsroom article I read.
Mm.
What else have you got?
Well, I think actually the fuel's a great one to start
Yeah,
with,
let's start with that.
because not only of how major is the crisis, it's fascinating to me, and you've started hinting at it, how particularly the media and even the political class have responded, which is fear.
Mm.
Day after day, we're being filled with fear in the same way, unfortunately, it paralleled the COVID experience. And so this is sort of like a fuel porn, if you will, PORN, just in case people are going, why am I talking about prawns? But it's just, we're being fed an absolute diet of it. Even as you've seen the four stages of particular crisis, it's really just modeled off COVID. So that's setting off alarm bells for me, not because the governments and policymakers shouldn't be making preparations, and they should have been doing this earlier, by the way, and we can come to that. But they seem to have picked up the COVID playbook. Literally the
Mm.
same four steps, color codes, but it's the media diet which is bothering me. I think I don't know about you, Marty, it's instilling a panic which is not necessary at this point.
Well, it's a panic that it's even easy to have. And I mean, I've worked in a newsroom, and one of the things that really struck me was how so many journalists are functionally innumerate. That they're not very good with numbers, and so it's really and I think this is true of a lot of young people. They really don't understand how much work fossil fuels do. I mean, a good way to understand it is if you take a cup of petrol and put it in a rotary hoe and see how much digging you get done with it. So it's a cup of petrol might cost you $1, and yet it's capable of doing a lot of work. I sent one of my kids off to school. Were given a question: what are the benefits of fossil fuels?
Mm.
And so I said, well, our van out there, it weighs 2 tons. And in order to get it to Gisborne, I probably have to work an hour or two, to
Mm.
pay for the gas, maybe more, depending on how much you get paid. But imagine if we had to push it.
Mm.
How many days would it take me to push that van to to Gisborne? And
Well, I
the
think at
teacher really
times,
went crooked him for that.
but this is the sort of thought experiments we should do. I think for me, and this goes just wider than the fuel, we take for granted a lot of the conveniences we have in life. So the fact that we just pull up to a gas station, fill up the tank, yep, cost us a sheer fortune and even more now, and we just drive. If I wanted to come down to Tauranga on the Mount or go down to Wellington, oh yeah, I can just do that. Whereas
You
actually
should
there
do
was a
that.
time not that long ago where, yeah, it was a very long journey. And I'd extrapolate further that even this, our democracies, our freedoms, I know this is a big thing on RCR, and rightly so. Our freedoms were hard fought for, but easily taken away. And I
Easily
think we take it
forgotten.
for granted.
Mm. Yeah,
But it,
yeah, the reality of, I mean, there's that quip, nothing puts the good old days into perspective so quickly as a power cut.
yeah. Well, you realize how reliant, I know having moved house recently, we didn't have internet for a day. And where we live, even though we're in Auckland, we're in a black spot for the 4G or 5G or any of it.
Right.
So we were basically without connectivity. And I mean, we survived, of course.
It's a bit like having
But
phantom limb syndrome, though, isn't it? You've got this. Oh, I'll just link into this thing,
yes,
and then it's gone, but you keep feeling it.
exactly right. It was like, oh, and I'd pick up my phone. It's like, oh, that's right, it's not connected. So in some ways, a little bit of crisis or contrast helps us understand what we've got. But I'm concerned about the panic that's being drummed up. And Rachel and I were talking this morning because I saw an article related to fuel that the Ministry of Education is already planning schools to be teaching remotely. We're going back to keeping our kids at home. And look, if this conflict continues and it goes on for months and we genuinely run out of fuel, you might have to think of extremes. But most of us send our kids to schools locally. That's how the
Mm.
system works. And the ministry's first point of call, and the media amplifying it, Marty, is, we got to, in effect, lock ourselves back in our houses and go online. It's like, why don't the kids just walk or cycle? These are some of the things we used to do. It's good for their
Yeah.
health, actually. And it might stop some of this helicopter parenting where you have to sort of put them in a Range Rover and drive them, 500 meters to the front gate. I don't know. It's just, for me, that just resonated of going, we're panicking in a way that's not needed at this point, I think.
The thing that it surprises me no one ever looks at is, there are a lot of if you go to the kids' drop-off area at school, there are a lot of vehicles there that are on automatic chokes and running really rich, and probably the benzene levels in the air are far higher than would be allowable, let alone to give to kids. And I guess, I mean, the teachers' unions probably know that their members, many of them prefer to teach on a bottle of Pinot Gris, and it may improve the quality of their teaching. So
My
there may
wife
be
is going to
upside.
come down and not that she's a unionist, but my wife might be visiting you after that comment.
You'll know what I'm talking about. Um,
Carry on. I
I see Julian
interrupted you.
Batchelor lost his defamation case against TVNZ as well. Was the other thing I looked at. That was that was interesting, and I mean, we probably don't talk enough about why the National Party, when they got into power, didn't remove Willie Jackson's conditions for receiving the Public Interest Journalism Fund that I'm led to believe, I think, go out to 2027. Why didn't they just take those out and also um, insist that TVNZ and RNZ met those conditions of their charter that demand balance? Why didn't they just do those two things and make things easier for themselves? Because the some of those conditions of the Public Interest Journalism Fund are that it's not only to give a Maori perspective, but he specified what the Maori perspective was, which is New Zealand's a systemically racist country, disadvantages Maori, who never ceded sovereignty, and is in partnership with the government. So Julian Batchelor, and obviously the judiciary's become pretty politicized as well. Was pushing it uphill to get there, wasn't he?
He was, and I haven't followed the case in depth, and I'm not a lawyer. So if we start with the Julian case, I thought, look, I thought at one level he had good grounds. I can never say that guy's name from the disinformation project, and I apologize to him for that. But yeah, he was saying some pretty crazy stuff over many years. Again, as RCR listeners know, as you and Marie and the wider team, we know, I mean, just outrageous, outrageous stuff. But defamation in New Zealand, the bar is exceptionally high, which is why we don't have many defamation cases. It's a
Right.
very, very high legal test. And again, I'm no lawyer, Marty, to know exactly why, but different people, MPs included over the years, who have been in effect impugned, defamed, they flirt with a legal case, but it's not worth it. And reading the news article about the case, Hotawa, whatever his name was, again, apologies that I can't think of it off the top of my head, but he used the claim of truth. And I think in the legalese, it means because he really and genuinely believes in what he says,
Right.
he's allowed to say it. That was my understanding of it. I don't know yours.
Well, I mean, I've been to one of Julian's meetings, and I think most of what he says is on the money. But you went to school in Whangarei, and you understand there are about three key things that are required to really get along with Maori. They like to feel that you like them. That's important. They've got a very keen sense of that. They need to feel that you don't think you're superior to them. Is another thing. They've got that egalitarian thing, although it doesn't play out in iwi politics. And they need to at least have doubts about whether they could beat you in a fight. So Julian failed all three of those. So that's why it's difficult for him to talk about that stuff. But we really do need to talk about it.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
mm,
Yeah, I mean, it's become monological. Particularly, well, we touched on very briefly earlier when we were talking about what kids are being taught at school. There is a view which is taught around the treaty in New Zealand, and the Public Interest Journalist Fund articulated all of that. It was an outrageous document, and not
mm,
just in the treaty politics area, but it entrenched a singular view. And what stunned me at the time, Marty, I mean, we were in opposition. It's like throwing, water at a fan. It's or as people might say, unless you can bleep this out, but it's like pissing in the wind. There we go, vulgarity out for the morning. But
keep going with
the
it.
the media itself basically was gaslighting everyone who was saying, "Well, look, it's here, black and white in the document." Oh no, it's not. No, it's not. We've still got editorial independence. It's like, no, you don't. You've taken the money, which you have. You are
Yeah.
bound by Willie Jackson's perspectives. And as to why National didn't stop it, I can't answer that, not for any other reason. I don't fully know because I'm with you. They should have not only stopped new funding, because they'll say, oh, no, we didn't renew it, but the contractual obligations were still there. And so the money from the pot that Willie Jackson set up still has to be spent. I personally don't buy that. In fact, I would go as far to say the government would have been better off saying there's no more public journalism fund. Yep, you can have the money because it's going to take us too much of legal fees to fight you. But actually, we're now giving you instruction to return to independence in editorial thought. You're not bound by these terms, and that's very much in the government's hands. Particularly with TVNZ and RNZ, they just don't seem to have any control of them, and it's
Yeah.
outrageous. It's outrageous how journalists on TVNZ are handling issues to do with the government or Māori issues or trans issues. RNZ, Red Radio, I mean, appalling. But I don't know what it is. The centre-right governments don't seem to want to take control when they have the power.
Mm. Well, and the tendency of, I mean, there's been some good polling work done on this by Dave Farrar at Curia about the extent to which New Zealand politicians are very either extreme left or left leaning. It's naturally going to happen. I mean, if they wanted an elegant solution, they could have just dropped RCR straight into, or proposed to drop it straight into national radio, because I know that the entire 3 years we've been running probably didn't cost as much as Willie Jackson was proposing to give them, give Radio New Zealand as an increase due to their cooperation with merging TVNZ and Radio New Zealand.
Oh, totally. The amount of taxpayer money which is wasted. I mean, in general, and again, this doesn't matter if it's a left wing or a right wing government, and it is horrendous. But in terms of our media, the state broadcasters, there is no pretense of neutrality from them. They are so far to the left on issues. It's outrageous. Again, when it comes to the treaty, climate change, trans and sexuality issues, I would argue, and maybe I'm biased, Marty, having come from the centre right, but they glory in putting the boot into Luxon and National and the centre right. And some listeners might go, yep, great. Um, but
Mm.
I think they're very soft, often on the left. And, I would argue what we saw with the Hipkins saga, and, it's terrible, any relationship breakup, but how that was treated very much with kids' gloves. And probably
Turns
comes
out you
back.
don't believe every woman.
That's exactly it, isn't it? The Me Too movement went
Mm.
strangely silent all of a sudden, but these are the inconsistencies. But this comes back to your earlier point around it's not just to the children, but how society treats that. If you step up like you do, the rest of us on RCR, I think, as we speak into the culture and say, hey, this isn't right, they get very aggressive, very assertive. All they'll do to cancel you, I mean, I've certainly experienced cancel culture over the years. They will do everything to silence you, pointing out the hypocrisies and the inconsistencies. And they love labels, don't they? Oh, you're fringe, you're conspiracy, and so on. And, oh, you're
Yeah.
bigoted, you're this phobe, you're that. And it's like, ugh, I
I,
don't know
I
about
find
you,
it
I'm
far
tired of it all.
easy to. I find it's far easier to think about left and right as people who want more government and less freedom, as being the left, and less government and more freedom as being the right. I think that sorts it out a lot more, because there are there's plenty of people who advocate for corporate welfare, which I'd argue is more government and less freedom. I mean, it's interesting to think about the difference between RCR and the mainstream media generally. And I build off a quick list in the half hour before we came on, and broadly 6 things that I came to. There's the assumption of stability that legacy media is obliged to do, because, as I said in our quick chat yesterday, the New Zealand Herald's got its whole front cover that's an ad for 36 months interest free for Harvey Norman. They don't want to be saying, hey, look, we may be in a state of civilizational collapse. All the signs are there, the transvestitism, the debasement of the currency. It's all happened before, long ago. Number 2 was ignoring of evil. Now, I think baby boomers were pressured to think of religion as philosophy for people who are too stupid to understand philosophy, and substituted human weakness, self-interest, greed, stupidity, the madness of crowds for evil. And I found things make a lot more sense if you understand that there is actually evil, and it is almost its own political force, and it's somehow does rule the earth, as the Bible claims. Number three was the customer. Now, people make the mistake of thinking that they are the customer of legacy media, but it's Harvey Norman or it's whoever the advertiser is. Whereas Reality Check Radio's customers are our listeners. They are our members, and none of the RCR presenters have become financially rich through our work here. We've normally, I clean carpets to subsidize my media habit. Recognition of vested interest. For most of the issues that people have strong opinions on, there are people who benefit from them having those opinions, and I think you have to factor that in. If you don't confront that in your coverage, it's tough to portray reality accurately. And then there's balance. And we go back to that point that we discussed about the education system. This is what good people think. This is what bad people think. And equality. I think the media tends to be orthodox in its belief that people are more or less equal. And again, what we've discovered through COVID, I think the scales fell off both of our eyes, didn't they? People aren't equal. Some people, and I sort of hold it as a 1 to 2 to 7 ratio. 1% of people are capable of independent thought. 2% of people feel inclined to enforce orthodoxy. And about 70% of people just want to be told what they have to do, say, and think to stay in the village. And that's who votes in Labour and National. And that's who media is aimed at. And they don't need to convince thinkers. In fact, what they did with the thinkers during COVID was they set the 20% of people who are enforcers on us, and the stupid thinkers said, oh, but this information, it's like, look, dipshit, only you care about information. And in a way, it's probably something we should consider as RCR is, well, do we need to just make some entertainment for people who want to know what good people think?
I think it's, in my view, it's a mixture. And so far as I think it's really important to think. I think it's also, God, there's an awkward sense. I think, but one of the things I love about RCR and the wider, and I hate this term, Marty, but the alternative media, but it's the quick expression of it is it's bringing in an array of viewpoints. And I don't know about yourself, I listen to various shows and perspectives and guests, and some I go, yep, I'm nodding. Other times I'm shaking my head going, no, this doesn't accord with my view.
Great.
But it's good. Multiple perspectives. Whereas coming back to that earlier word, I find a lot of mainstream media is monological, which is why you're seeing more and more reporters interviewing each other. They're just talking to themselves. But yeah, you don't get that breadth. You certainly
and it's so
saw
jarring, isn't it? When you say you're on X and you'll have a variety of ideas about a topic, and some people you get some, albeit brief, sometimes analysis from people who are really in the thick of it, and then you watch the news and you think, oh, it's not even accidentally not representative of reality. It seems to be cynically manufacturing a reality that suits the advertisers.
yeah,
I don't know.
I think so. I mean, look, we all operate out of our bias. It's not unique to simply media. We all have our biases and prejudices for a variety of reasons. But at the same time, media holds an enormous amount of power. And how they choose to frame a story is very deliberate. And you also have to factor in, as you will, it's advertisers. But they also know sort of how at this point the human mind's working. And what I mean by this is a lot of it now, they know we're scrolling at speed on our devices. And so a lot of effort is put into what the headline says,
Yeah.
because that's all that most people read. And so I'm sorry to use the Chris Hipkins example. I'm not trying to throw too much mud at him personally, but the way the
He
media
seems
reported
to
it,
have his own gravitational pull for mud at the moment.
it does. But it just illustrates things perfectly of how the mainstream media reported it, the now infamous headline of unsubstantiated claims. So if,
Yeah.
I don't know, 96%, whatever it is, of Kiwis scrolling at speed on their devices, that's all they would have read. Something about Chris Hipkins and some unsubstantiated claim.
Yeah.
For those who choose to read more or go to other media outlets, then they begin to get more of the context. But most Kiwis don't. So a very long way of saying media understands this and how they're packaging things to you, which is why I just keep encouraging people, go wide. You've got to read broadly. And I'd say to people too, be on RCR, but we don't have to be the only diet. Do see what
Mm.
other people are saying and thinking, and then weigh it all up for yourselves and make a decision on whatever the topic is.
And don't project your own unique individualism on other people. I tweeted earlier this week that well, it's just a number I plucked out of the air, but I said 60% of Chris Hipkins' political success is due to his concerned little fawning howdy-doody eyebrows, that he can do that. That stimulates the mothering response in his foolish socialist
I never
anxious
thought of that.
women, and tells the fawning weak socialist men that he's one of them. He's a fellow herd creature. I think that's his ability to sort of just move them up like this, like, "Oh, what me worry," kind of thing.
There's probably a truth, even in the wider sense. I know when I years ago was studying public speaking, of all things, one of the things they would often tell you to do, if you'd recorded yourself, not for vanity's sake, but to see how you're presenting, to mute yourself. And then, because so much, I think about 80% of communication is actually non-verbal, the way that we do express ourselves. And that's, for me, was quite insightful. And you see that with political leaders or academic leaders, often how they look, how their physical expressions, the movement of the eyebrows, actually is sending quite a lot of messages to people. If someone is just bland and boring, no one's going to listen to them regardless of what they're saying.
Mm.
But I still look. I have to be honest. I'm from formerly of the National Party. I do not understand how Chris Hipkins is still the leader, and still gets the support he does from Kiwis who seem to have forgotten what he did, and not just during COVID, but right up to when they lost the election, just over 2 years ago.
You got to think about it in terms of a village. I mean, in a village, you've got ladies who are saying to their husbands, "Look, I know we're short on food, but go and catch another rabbit because, we need to feed the children." Great. That's how we've survived. But that's morphed into just endlessly give welfare to people who don't really deserve it, or who, worse still, who are harmed by it. That's you can get long-term kindness and short-term kindness. I think of Labour as very much the party of short-term kindness. If someone's a meth addict, the kindest thing you can do is give them more meth in the short term. The long term, the kindest thing you can do is call the cops.
Oh, absolutely. And I know this is a tangential stuff, but we do it with the young
That's what the
kids now
show's all
too
about,
around.
Simon. Let's
Yeah,
go.
it's like around the whole gender ideology stuff. Oh, the kind thing is just to affirm the young person. It's like, no, it's
Yeah.
not.
No, it's not.
Tell them who they're, a boy or a girl, love them, care for them, guide them through puberty, that we all go through. But this is unfortunately where we are. And look, Jacinda Ardern, I'm sorry to invoke her name. That people are probably banging their heads against the table. But, she's traded off kindness and empathy. I mean, she literally is traveling the world now, prattling about these words, but doesn't actually understand what they mean. And the listeners don't understand what it means because they mistake kindness for simply just being nice. But, being nice is not enough. Acting in kindness is based on justice, and that means doing what is right. You you don't just let your kids eat chocolate and lollies all day because that's the nice thing. You stop them because it's not good for their health. It's not the right thing to do.
It's
But this is where
astonishing
we
as a
live.
parent how much energy goes into stopping your kids doing things that are bad for them.
Yeah.
That surprised me, actually. I thought, man, so much of my effort isn't guiding them on, it's just stopping them doing things that aren't going to be good for them.
As I say, with all stepkids in my case, and the youngest now 22, but Rachel and I have often reflected how often we're saying no. No to this, no to that. And you sort of wonder at one level what impact it's having on the child. Because at some level you go, is this just feeding all this negativity? But on the flip side, you do have to tell them, no, no, don't put your hand on the iron. No, don't leave the stove on, the gas hobs on. Don't eat all that food. Don't go dating that loser. All of this stuff. But I suppose too, it's surrounded hopefully by a sense of love and support, which you hope your kids are picking up on as well. But
Well,
that's what we're there to do.
there's a few quips or a few aphorisms that have influenced my parenting. One is Mark Twain's comment that there's something you learn picking a cat up by the tail that you can't learn no other way. And the other one is George Orwell's quote that the quickest way to end a war is to lose it. And that certainly is sometimes the case with my youngest child. But you can. One of the techniques I use to kind of get them to understand what I'm saying is I used to pretend with my eldest that I was suddenly getting a phone call from 23-year-old her. And she'd say, well, yeah, I know I know you're just a child, but well, you said no. I'd pretend, that she was either thanking me for forcing her to do something or getting her not to do something. And, you can say to a kid, hey, look, in 6 months, if you could choose, would you rather be the kid who goes and trains jujitsu 3 times a week, even when you don't feel like it, or the kid who comes and sits down and watches TV and eats chips? Which one do you want to be? They can't escape that. And to their credit, so in my surprise, they're actually honest about it. They're like, well, I'd rather be the kid who trained. And that's like, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd often, I mean, look, I'm no parenting expert and lots of failures. As I said, in my case, just as a step parent. And the kids were, the three older ones were in their teenage years. That was that was quite something, going from a single life to married with five, and three are teenagers. But yeah, a lot of the time I found it's just a bit like what you were doing. I didn't use the phone technique, but just saying, where do you want to be? I know where you are now. Where do you want to be? And to the extent I could, even with the younger ones, getting them to articulate their reasoning. And it wasn't as if I was sitting down having a deep philosophical discussion with the kids, but getting them to articulate the motivations. Because often, well, particularly for the girls, the peer pressure in behind from their friends. Well, why do you really need to buy this thing or do that thing? Oh, I see. It's Jenny or Mabel. Not that I know anyone called Mabel, but those influences. But once they began to talk about it, and I don't know about yourself, I found particularly as they got older, there was sort of like a respect. I mean, still the adult in the relationship, but it's respecting them to allow them to talk and explain where they're coming from, rather than just being told, no, you're not
And
doing
they
this.
can often, can't they? Which is surprising. I mean, I remember my memory of being young is quite vivid. I remember, I mean,
Well, it wasn't that long ago, Marty.
some of it was. I remember being dragged, and I sort of have things I tell kids to emphasis to show them how old I am. I remember being, when I went to school in London at the age of about 9 or something, being dragged upstairs by my collar and beaten with a gym shoe. Most kids are like, oh, really? Makes me sound like I'm in a Charles Dickens novel. I remember my teacher, when I was about 11, beckoning me towards his desk and holding out his truck keys and saying, go to my truck and get my smokes, boy. And I went out to get his smokes from the glove box and had to sift through boxes of ammunition to get it. And there's a gun behind his seat. And I thought, well, I could just load this up and go around shooting people. He must really trust me. Walked back feeling quite happy with his Rothmans.
Oh, I remember uncles asking us to pop down to the dairy to go and buy them their cigarettes and so on. A whole different time. I mean, God, we can sit and reminisce. I mean, I always remember, as a lot of viewers will, like bucket seats in cars. We had an old Ford Falcon, I think it was, with a bucket seat in the front, no seatbelt, just you just squeeze in. I'm not saying we go back to that. We're safer for what we've got now, but it's a whole different time.
I got so drunk that I couldn't walk and threw up in my parents' hall for the first time after going to a hospital party with Cook Hospital staff in Gisborne when I was 4.
Oh God, 4 years old. What were you?
Yeah.
Can you? What were you drinking?
Oh, just whatever. I'm just going around these women who smelled nice and looked pretty and saying, could I have a sip of your drink? It was a portent of what was to come, Simon. The other interesting thing that happened, and this passed without any coverage that I saw, but Paul Ehrlich died. Now, Paul Ehrlich was the Stanford biologist who wrote this 1968 bestseller, The Population Bomb. And that has had so many flow-on effects, hasn't it? He advocated easy access to abortion, contraception, and I think he bemoaned the fact that adding temporary sterilants to the water supplies was not technically feasible. He endorsed India's program of sterilizing people, and about 3,000 men died from botched operations. And as Elon Musk has bluntly observed, Ehrlich's work may be the most damaging anti-human thing ever written.
Oh, I think very contributory. I would phrase it as a culture of death. And it's a humanity that, well, it's a notion of our humanity which lacks any hope or any sense of the future. And, as someone who's from a Christian faith, I obviously have a clear view of what the future looks like, and hope-filled because of, without getting too religious, the place of Jesus
Get
Christ and what
religious.
he's achieved. But at the
Yeah.
same time, even in a secular space, humanity reproducing itself, the creativity which is shown as our populations grow, are itself a positive things. But Ehrlich and others, very negative, very anti-human. But one of the things I've always noticed with people who argue like he did, it's always projected onto the other.
Yeah.
They don't want to be aborted. They don't want to be sterilized. It's always someone else. And so that is something very disturbing because human history is replete with that othering of people. And so, yeah, very, very damaging. It's fueled a lot of policies, reproductive policies around the world. But for me personally, the human population is going to grow as it will grow, and we're creative.
Yeah.
We're resilient.
Well, it
We
is that it's one of my favorite bits of Christianity is the admonition to choose life, and when you argue against, or I wouldn't say I'm arguing against abortion, although I am, so much as just saying, hey, some years we're aborting as many potential New Zealanders as the total loss of Kiwi soldiers in World War One. Every single day, there's a Christchurch massacre or more happening in New Zealand of however you conceive it, but we will never see the potential. And we're naive if we don't think we're losing some incredible
mm,
potential. And people's response is often, well, if women don't care about the kids enough to have them, then it doesn't speak very well for how they're going to be. And so it's not for me. The abortion's kind of the bottom of the cliff. I'm more interested in, well, is the education system encouraging
mm,
or aimed at reducing the number of abortions? And where are these people coming from who, I mean, are we teaching children, for example, what makes a good parent? Parents are only mentioned in the sex education curriculum in terms of people who might disapprove of your lifestyle choices that you need to get around. This is with the creepy interest that New Zealand teachers take in the sexuality of other people's children.
oh, it's quite disturbing. I mean, with my family first hat on, the stuff that is before young people. I mean, as parents listening here, make sure you know what your school's teaching them, and not just in the RSE or relationship and sexuality education, but broader. Because even in English and mathematics and science, for example, there's a whole lot of political notions that have been introduced. So, know what they're teaching your
They've been
kids. And
told
then
to introduce them too, haven't they? They've been told, hey, see if you can just spread any opportunity you have
Oh,
to.
look, the New Zealand curriculum's replete with it. I mean, the journals now, and I'm sorry I don't have, them here immediately to hand, but you know how as kids you used to have little books and you'd read them? I
Mm,
mean, they're all ideologically loaded now. Again, climate change, treatyism, and so forth. I mean, those are just two quick examples. But it's just rife, absolutely rife. And so I think as parents, I mean, life is busy, but we've got to be really involved with the kids. But I'd say, Marty, and it's been happening over many years and decades, but trying to replace parents with the state. And I've actually just finished an interview with a woman called Erica Commissar, and this was on the Family First channel, so I wasn't able to do it for RCR. But, she says actually parents should be looking after their kids to the extent they can. But, look at New Zealand, all the tax breaks and so forth to get you back into work, she says. Um, and your kids are just left with strangers. And she argues as a clinical psychologist and social worker that this ain't good for your kids.
it's
But
really not.
it isn't. And again, to underline the point, it's not always easy. Gosh, life is expensive. People need to get incomes and so forth. But she's saying, there's no one better than the parents to love the child and give them the security that they need. No, I've got distracted. We were going with hope. You mentioned abortion too. Yeah, it's about 50 abortions a day. And look, people will know I'm strongly pro-life, but I also do understand why a lot of women make the choice and decision.
So do
I'd
I.
always make the distinction between, if you will, the objective statement, which is abortion is wrong, and then the more subjective or contextual. It's not saying it's still the right decision, but I can understand a lot of women that I've worked with and counseled over the years or have shared their experiences. Lots of force and coercion, whether it's a grandmother, friends, family, the boyfriend. It's not an easy place. But I just put to people, when does humanity start? If you believe in human rights, then it's not a particularly difficult concept. If you're a human, you have rights. And I, for one, don't believe your human rights are gifted to you during the birth canal. They
Mm.
exist from the moment of conception. And, when you step away from that concept, you see human rights begin to fray all around the edges and within. So now, abortion increases every year in New Zealand. Euthanasia now has been introduced. We have a pro-drug culture, which has been promoted. The trans lobby, again, I think it's profoundly anti-human. And a whole lot of other things. Our medical rights, as we know through COVID, freedom of religion. Oh, no, no, you can't stand outside and pray. You'll be arrested. I mean, it just doesn't start in one area. It spreads that culture of death, which I think we must push back against.
Yeah, I mean, I asked you yesterday during our little chat we had whether you thought that the world was ruled by Satan, and you weren't sure that it was. I mean, certainly scripturally, uh, it is. I mean, if you look at John 12:31. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. This verse indicates that Satan holds a position of authority. Um, John 14:30 has Jesus saying, I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of the world is coming and he has nothing in me. So, I mean, if and the most famous one, I guess, is the Ephesians 6:12, which says it the most explicitly, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I mean, I found as I studied evil, that was pretty much how I ended up becoming a Christian, in the same way as one might sail across the date line. It wasn't with a blinding flash. I just realized I was lamenting the fact that we were coasting on the momentum from being a Christian society that valued telling the truth. And rather than reinvent the wheel, I decided that rather than study the Bible to form straw man arguments for it being philosophy for people who are too stupid to understand philosophy, I took it seriously, and I'd challenge anyone that your convictions in that area won't survive serious Bible study. It's an incredible thing.
Oh, look, the Christian myself certainly encourage people in order to put pay to that axiom you've used around, religion is for people who don't understand philosophy. I made sure I went and did both postgraduate work in philosophy and also in theology. So foot in both camps.
Yeah.
Look, in terms of evil is real. I do believe in the concept of evil. Do I think it rules the world? No. And part of that for me is linked to the wider gospel story of Christ's victory on the cross and the fact that he has broken the chains of hell. That he's gone and freed people. He's won a victory. But in terms of the times that we live in, evil is still around. It is still present. And I suppose I'd say then two other things on that is one, we we can be influenced by it, but more often than not, that's through our own choices. Because I see evil not as some sort of extra. Evil for me is simply, and we were talking about it yesterday, evil is the absence of good. And I'm trying to think of a way to simply put it, because again, I don't see it as separate. I don't see good as one sort of entity and evil as another, and they're fighting it out like boxers. Evil is the absence of good, because God is all things, and so evil becomes an absence of that. And I think there are many absences in our modern world, and some things which happen, I think, are simply beyond humans making wrong judgments or wrong think. There is that, as you say, a spiritual battle and an influence, and I think it's important to call it out. But it is, as we said yesterday, it's one of the harder things in Christian theology to explain to people, that there's this world that we can see around us, but the belief in core Christian teaching that there is a spiritual battle, a wider battle. But I would say the mystery of the cross is that Christ has won the victory. He won the victory 2,000 years ago. And so that gives me a lot of hope. So when I've done all my political work and advocacy, and more often than not lost, when I think about the various ethical battles I had to fight in Parliament, well, I lost, but I've never lost my smile or hope because I believe in the Christian teaching that Christ has won. And I'm just
Do you
called to
think once
participate.
saved, always saved?
Sorry?
Do you subscribe to the once saved, always saved idea?
No, no is the short answer, and it's probably
Mm.
one of the general differences between sort of Catholic thought and probably more evangelical Protestantism that says, yeah, once you're saved, you always are. I think for us as a Catholic, we're always working towards it through God's grace. I better add, we don't earn our own
Mm.
salvation. We're called to participate, but no, because for me, if you're saved and then go and live a terrible life, I don't think that to me makes a lot of sense. So for me, it's a process rather than a specific moment. Is how I see it. But I know your own view because you've been doing a lot of scriptural reading and thought in this space.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not advanced in it enough to have complex theological debates, but yeah, I certainly think that, I mean, grace gets you in the gate of that new covenant, which is the tabernacle, but you've got to keep doing the analogous actions to the Levites, as I understand it through what I've learned so far. And so, yeah, you and in scripture, Satan can come before the throne and say, well, this guy's done this and this and this, and if you haven't followed the directions, then you can get whacked. So I mean, the interest I had in putting on the full armor of God, was around those various factors that do offer you some sort of protection in that world. And I mean, I would have been so surprised to hear myself speaking this way even last year. It's, as I said, it's been something I crossed like a sailor crossing the date line. But once you take a step towards it, it takes a step towards you. And then the scaffolding that you have to put to rationalize it, because it's unreasonable. And to say it's the opiate of the multitudes is
Oh yeah.
exactly wrong. It's not soothing at all.
No, it's very sacrificial. I mean, again, Rach and I have been talking about this a lot lately. And it's a very general perspective here, but so much of the modern world is very self-focused. Focus on yourself, be mindful,
You do
ponder how
you.
you improve
You go,
yourself,
girl.
and then go into the world. Where the Christian perspective is sacrifice and serving others. And it's the thing of by serving others, by helping others, you yourself become a better person. You don't have to try and improve self by working at yourself alone. You do it by sacrificing. You do it, as you say, by going out and serving and helping others. And for me in my life, it's been a big, big part of it. Haven't got it always
Mm.
right by any means, but I have found the times where I've been literally generous, giving money away and supporting them, all my time, the effort, all the work from the prisons and working in Fiji. I think it made me a better person by helping others. With this important caveat, done with the altruism. It's not like, ooh, I'm going to go and help this person
Yeah.
because it'll make me better. It's not that, but it's just realizing that well, it's the old adage: in giving, you receive. And I think
Mm.
that's profoundly Christian, and it's at odds with the modern world, which is no, sort yourself out first, focus on yourself, which I think is boring. Well, maybe I'm just
Well,
boring.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing that has really struck me is the extent to which, I mean, the first trick that Satan pulled in the Garden of Eden was basically to tell Eve, particularly, "Hey, God's keeping the best stuff from you." And so I kind of did think about it in those terms, like, well, I do enjoy doing all these things which I'm told not to do. But there is that element, and this is what I've talked about taking a step towards it, and it takes a step towards you, and that replacement of the heart of stone with the heart of flesh is it changes your heart. It changes what you want. And I've found myself often overflowing with joy, and also just experienced a profound absence of fear. Um,
I think that's, again, we were chatting yesterday, which I have to say absolutely absolutely loved and enjoyed. But yeah, absence of fear. I mean, we started this show about how much fear has been generated in the media around the oil crisis, and we all know the fear which was generated during COVID, and there's been a whole lot of other stories and issues that are constantly generating that. But to live a fearless life um, makes it much more relaxing. And shared with you that interview I did with Tanya Unkovich, who I've got a lot of time for, and her expression was, "Oh, hello, fear. It's nice to see you." And so, sort of facing into it and embracing it, not because you want it, but actually you have that confidence. And as you say, sort of a is it a joy? I suppose it is the joy that does come from it. I'm not going to be fearful of things. I'm more trusting, and I think it's a great way to be.
mm. Well, I mean, getting back to, I guess, the lies that are swirling around, because we've in the media in particular. One of the things that popped up on my feed this morning was a story about Dr. Fred Kummerow. And he, in 1957, published a paper in Science linking trans fats to heart disease. This is sort of, if we can think about this in terms of the transgender thing, in terms of the climate, in terms of these modern anxieties, um, trans fats were in everything: margarine, shortening, every processed food on the shelf. In 1968, he urged the American Heart Association to act. They ignored him. For decades, they kept telling Americans to replace butter with margarine. He kept publishing. Trans fats raise LDL, lower HDL, and trigger inflammation in artery walls. He also discovered that oxidized cholesterol, not regular cholesterol, drives plaque buildup. So in 2009, aged 94, he filed a citizen petition demanding the FDA ban trans fats. The law required a response within 180 days. The FDA waited 4 years. So in 2013, at 98 years old, Fred Kummerow sued the FDA. In 2015, the FDA finally ruled trans fats were not safe and banned them from the food supply. The CDC estimates the ban prevents 20,000 heart attacks and 7,000 deaths each year. So I guess that's he spent 60 years proving they were killing us. They ignored him, and he took them to court. He was 100 years old when he won. So,
Well, there's a lesson in it. That news to me, or it's the faintest bell, I mean, around the trans fats, but isn't that a living by your convictions?
mm,
And in his case, being vindicated. But as you were speaking, I sort of think of the likes of William Wilberforce around ending slavery, setting up, of all things, the Royal SPCA, the Society for the Protection of Animals. This was
that
not
then
something which
spawned
happened.
I think and then the Society for the Protection of Animals spawned the Society for the Protection of Children. So,
Mm. But this was something that he and the Clapham sect uh, fought for years. And for me, again, when I travel the country or even when I'm overseas talking to different people, it's like you often don't make change overnight. And we've got to have that resilience. And it applies even here to RCR and the topics we talk about. It's very rarely will we get a quick, simple win. You've just got to keep plugging away like that doctor did, like Wilberforce did. We just keep speaking our views, our opinions, and truth, and actually change. I think eventually does come, but it's it's often very hard and uphill.
mm. Is there anything that you think New Zealand urgently, how I know we've got 2 minutes to do this, but is there anything that you think that New Zealand should urgently change to alter our course?
Gosh, it would be more than 2 minutes, but I think you mentioned civilizational decline earlier, and I think New Zealanders do have to address that it's happening around them. We need to appreciate the systems we have. I'm not saying our electorate systems, our parliamentary systems, and all of that are perfect, but boy, they are a hell of a lot better than most places in the world. And there's a relativism in play, Marty, that says, "Oh, no, all systems are equal, and ours is terrible." No, it's not. Um, what we have is pretty amazing compared to most places. Our foundational values, in this case Judeo-Christian, are really important, and they're not just the equivalent of other religious or value traditions. Again, we've been lied to when people say, "Oh, it's all the same." No, it's not. Um, And I think too, we've just got to stop beating ourselves down. There is that real negative hit job on our Western Judeo-Christian society. It's particularly our kids being told that we're the most racist, broken, terrible country. It's like, no, we're not. We can look at our faults, but we need to celebrate who we are, or the world that we live in, the Western freedoms we have, faulted as they are at times, will go. And I don't want that. So I think it behoves all of us, particularly as parents, to encourage our kids to say, yep, we see the faults in our society, but our values, the systems and civilization we've built are good.
Amen. Well, that's a good place to leave it, and I don't want to see it falter either. But thanks so much for joining me this morning, Simon. It's been a blast, and yeah, I look forward to meeting in person one day.
I am too. And this is where the moment we find we forgot to press the record button, like I've done before. No, only
No,
kidding.
no, I I have nightmares about that.
Yeah, I've done that. I know we're wrapping. I've done that a few times. I've started and be fair, I'm a few minutes in. It's like, oh crap, I forgot the last step. But you're more the professional. But look, Marty, it's been a pleasure.
I'm sure it's like asking a woman who's not pregnant if she's pregnant. It's something you only do once.
Very valid point.
Have a great week, everyone.
You too.